Hi, and welcome to the Dr. Z and J.W podcast. I'm J.W. Stewart, a veteran broadcaster and journalist with nearly 30 years experience. I've worked at ESPN and NBC, and now I teach at the University of New Haven.
And I'm Sheahon Zenger. I started my career as a football coach at Drake, Kansas State, South Florida, and Wyoming before becoming the director of athletics at Illinois State University, the University of Kansas, and now the University of New Haven. And this is the Dr. Z and J.W podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the Dr. Z and J.W podcast, brought to you by our presenting sponsor, the Pink Clover Foundation. Thank you for joining us across all of our social media platforms. And as always, our podcast is available on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. I'm J.W. Stewart, joined as always by Sheahon Zenger. Dr. Z. Dr. Z, how you doing today?
I'm good, J.W. As always, good to be here.
Great to be with you. And I say this, it seems like every podcast we've done now for the last 3 or 4, right? We're always excited about our guests that we have on. I'm really excited about who we have on today. Our guest today is Chris Berman, legendary ESPN sportscaster who's basically been at ESPN since day one back in 1979. Chris is backstage for a few minutes, and then he'll be joining us. He's joining us on the phone from Hawaii. I've actually never been to Hawaii, Dr. Z. Have you been to Hawaii?
I've been there a couple times, and it was either football related as a coach or basketball related as an AD. So I didn't do the touristy things. And as a football coach, we were in and out. Our head coach didn't want to go in there. You can get sucked into feeling like you're a tourist, and they beat you.
Yeah.
So we flew in, went to bed, got up. I think we played the game at midnight, our time, Wyoming time. And then we allowed the guys to go out that night. I went for a run on the beach, and that was it. Now, the next different is the Night Classic, and I got to see a few more things.
Yeah. Hopefully someday I'll get a chance to get out there. But I wanted to briefly talk to you and talk to our viewers and listeners today about our new presenting sponsor, the Pink Clover Foundation. Not only is the Pink Clover Foundation a sponsor, but it's also been a friend to us at the University of New Haven. The Pink Clover Foundation honors the late Colleen Sorbello, who passed away in September of 2017 after a 4-year battle with breast cancer. Colleen's husband, Sam, played football at UNH, has been one of the university's biggest benefactors over the years. In fact, in 2018, Sam and his family dedicated the Colleen Sorbello Research Laboratory, which is over in Dodds Hall, and also established the Colleen Sorbello Memorial Breast Cancer Research Award, which supports a student pursuing breast cancer research. So for more details on how you can help in the fight against breast cancer, please visit pinkcloverfoundation.org. And Dr. Z, we are certainly glad to have the Pink Clover Foundation as a member of our team, and we're certainly glad to be a member of their team as well.
Well, I'll tell you, I didn't get to meet Colleen. I wasn't here yet, but I have gotten to know Sam pretty well. And I think anyone in the UNH family that's met Sam or knows Sam, I don't say this lightly, he's what they call a prince of a guy. He's one of the best. And anything that he does comes from his heart, and is just one of the finest men I've met.
Still cares very much about his alma mater, which is obvious, and all that he's done for our school and all he will continue to do, he and his family. And again, for more details on how you can help in the fight against breast cancer, please visit pinkcloverfoundation.org. All right, let's move on to our guest today. As I mentioned, our guest is Chris Berman, who's worked at ESPN since 1979, which was the year the first all-sports network came on the air. He's been named National Sportscaster of the Year 6 times. Boomer and his various shows have won 10 Emmy Awards. He has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He's in numerous halls of fame and was the recipient of the Pro Football Hall of Fame's prestigious Pete Rozelle Radio Television Award. And Chris Berman now joins us on the phone from his place in Hawaii. Boomer, how are you?
J.W., good to be with you. Dr. Z, good to meet you. You guys are all about initials, huh? J.W.Z. This is a Vanna White special, right?
Love it.
Yeah, we might have to ask the Swami to buy a vowel or something.
Yeah. When you have a first name like mine, Boomer, you got to use initials.
Yep, I get it. You're good names for Scrabble then, huh?
Yeah, that's right.
It's all about the alphabet soup. before we talk about, speaking of initials, before we talk about ESPN, Boomer, what's life like in Hawaii these days?
Well, I happened to be here when it all hit. I'll be home soon. I mean, it's a very safe place. It's the safest place probably in the U.S. or the world, to be honest with you. I didn't run away from. I happened to be here, and so that's kind of what happened. But I'll be home. Looking forward to being with everybody, and getting to New Haven. We can take out nice, good Italian food. I miss it.
Well, we certainly miss you, and we look forward to seeing you back here in the contiguous United States really soon. But Boomer, take us back to the beginning. Take us back to 1979, or even just before 1979. I know the story, but a lot of people don't. How did you end up arriving at ESPN?
Well, to tell the story fully, J.W., I mean, we have to bring everybody, and if there's students listening, this is a revelation. But if we go to the late 70s, let me give you a big picture, then I'll answer your question specifically. So late 70s, cable was it was neophyte. People didn't really, you had it if you lived in the mountains. For whatever reason, Connecticut had a few systems. We don't really have mountains. We got hills, but there were some cable systems which, for a non-remote place, was kind of advanced at the time. But cable TV, I mean, you're going to spend $20 a month to do what? You have an antenna, you get 3, 4, 5 if you're near New York, maybe 8, 9 stations, etc. What would you spend money to get 36 channels for? Yes, the reception's a little bit better than having to move the rabbit ears. Again, I'm dating myself, but you have to answer this question by going back 40 or 45 years and the landscape. So now ESPN, Bill Rasmussen, came up with an idea to do University of Connecticut football, basketball, and other sports on cable systems in Connecticut. How do you do that? Well, he went down and saw RCA in New Jersey, exit, whatever it is. Everything's an exit in New Jersey. And you can rent a spot on a satellite, a transponder. All this is new words, and it costs $30,000 or $35,000 a month, and its signal goes up and it comes back, and blah blah blah. And Bill said, "Well, I don't even have 35, just to put on cable in Connecticut." And his kind of face dropped. I wasn't at the meeting, but he's in his upper 80s, still sharp. We talk several times a year. And they said, well, for the same price, you can go to all 50 states. No kidding. So that's how we started, and that's why we, ESPN, are in Connecticut. So we went on the air September 7th, 1979, Labor Day weekend. At the time, I was my third job out of Brown on the air, Radio Westerly, Rhode Island, Radio Waterbury, Connecticut, which I was still doing while I was TV Channel 30 Sports on the weekend. Weekend only, Saturday, Sunday. And I had applied and et cetera, and they liked me. I said, you can watch me. I'm not even sending in a tape. You can watch me Saturday and Sunday nights. As good as bad as it is, you'll see the whole thing. And they asked if I'd be interested in being the kind of the sign-off guy. We were not 24 hours except for the weekend the first year. I was 24 with long hair and a mustache, and which was de rigueur in the late 70s. Just look at Will Ferrell. So you're going to do the late show at 2:30 or 3 in the morning Eastern, which would be West Coast time, midnight, and et cetera. And would you be interested? For $16,000, I'm in. And so I was there the first month. I started October 1st, but I was around. We didn't know if ESPN would make it, but at 24. Didn't have a family, it was worth, if I was 35, like George Grand, it was doing news in Channel 8 New Haven at the time, for example, and had a family, you're giving up an over-the-air broadcast job for something that may not exist in 2 years. That was a gamble. For me, no. So there I was on at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning, often in the winter. An interesting drive home at 4 in the morning in January to Naugatuck, Connecticut, where I was living at the time. But my goodness, I mean, every now and then you get an opportunity, and this will be less than anybody. If you see it and grab it for all it's worth, you never know what's going to lead. Chances are it would have led nowhere. But 40 years later, we're doing a podcast, so I guess it led somewhere. It's a long answer, but you got to understand the landscape at the time. At cable, it wasn't even, geez, sports? Who's going to watch this for 24 hours? Well, nobody. That's not the point. Some people get off at work at 1 in the morning, restaurants, let's say, and they want something to watch for an hour. It may not be the NFL. It might be Australian rules football or something even lesser than that, but it's on. And we filled a gap. I don't know if it was needed, but it was wanted. And it's a good market success story. I'm proud to be one of those that helped put the bricks in the corner of the building that has now become, ESPN. Everybody knows it.
When you drive by ESPN in Bristol, nowadays there's buildings all over the place. But back in the day, Boomer, how many buildings did you guys have at the beginning?
Well, we had one. It's a big deal when we built building 2. And building 3, now we have, building like 17. We have buildings with letters. Maybe we have a J.W. or a Z building. I don't know. I will say this. It is amazing. Bob Lee and I always have a joke. Things will be better in the new building. And when they built up building 2, that we started saying that, things are going to be much better in the new building. And now we have, I don't know, 25, 30. Things will be better in the new building. Hey, look, when we started, there were 70, 75 of us total. In the very beginning. And that's everybody. From the president, Chet Simmons, and his executive producer, right-hand man, Scotty Connell, 2 great people. Both have passed on. And everybody, whether they were the overnight, whether they were the drivers or the overnight tape librarians or on the air or camera or a few ad salesmen, whatever it was like 75-ish in the fall of 79. Now I think worldwide we have 7,000 employees. I'm not sure, but it's quite a story.
In those early days, I have one more question. I know Dr. Z's got some questions for you as well, Boomer. In those early days, you weren't, ESPN didn't have the broadcast rights for NFL and for Major League Baseball and the NBA like we see today. What were some of the craziest sports that you covered back in the early days of ESPN?
Well, personally covered. Now, of course, we had on our air all sorts of stuff. And there was, none of it was gimmicky. It was sports that we may not have cared about. I laugh at this because it sounds funny, but, we had midget racing. No, I don't mean,
right.
Short
right.
folks. The midget car racing, but we had that. I couldn't tell you what night it was. On Tuesday night we got midget racing, like the mini. But people watched it. I don't mean flooded to the. I don't think we said Nielsen ratings, but records, but they watched it. We had the Canadian Football League, which is why I'm a fan of it to this day. Warren Moon was playing for Edmonton, and they won 5 championships, and we had 2 games on a week. We had Australian rules football, right? That's a classic. With 18 people aside wearing no padding. You talk about rough and tumble. The people liked it. Now, myself, there was a few. I did Division III wrestling one time at the championships. I did, which again is certainly legit. I was in Quad Cities, right on the, Illinois, Iowa, at Augustana College, the alma mater of Kenny Anderson, Bengals quarterback. But the two things that stand out, if you want to chuckle, I did a Legends of Billiards, like 8 of them, 4 days, 21 shows, tuxedo. But that included Willie Mosconi and Minnesota Fats. Now, look, that wasn't on my life goal to do billiards, but Willie Mosconi and Minnesota Fats. Now those are the names. They'd be the first 2 names of billiards you would bring up in the history of the sport. So I did that. And then, of course, the funniest, or looking back at it, I did darts. Yep, I did darts once. And actually, a very funny story about that one. It was in a ballroom in New York. I couldn't tell you the hotel now, but I mean, it was, again, that's legitimate competition. And I don't know the first thing about darts, except we all have a dartboard, your thing, and then you try to hit the highest number, right? We get it. So there's like 64 dartboards or 32 dartboards for the opening round or whatever. I said, well, what do I go and watch? It had a color, man. And what am I watching here? Well, I'll go out and watch this one guy, an Irish fella. I don't remember his name now. And he'll probably be one of the final 8, whatever we're going to do, the last 8 of them, when we're down to 8. And I go out there at like 9 in the morning, and he can't hit anything. I mean, this is like me, it's like, I mean, I'm exaggerating. He didn't hit the chandelier or the drape, but it wasn't good, right? So he fires down about 9-10, a high ball with dark liquid in it. I can only imagine what proof it was. And after that, he was like bullseyes. And I said, well, these guys are athletes. This is classic. So at any rate, I did darts. That would be probably the top answer for that one. I laugh at it, but again, you have a good time doing it. There are people into it, and somebody won and somebody lost, and there was a reason, and we were there to chronicle it.
J.W., I got to ask you, just for the viewers, as I'm listening to Boomer, someone that I've watched all of my adult life, and by the way, you're going to have to ask me to reach deep in my bag of tricks to top your guest, J.W. I think you're trying to put out of my lane here in talking to Boomer, but the inception of ESPN, I remember I'm a freshman in high school. By now it's 1980. And Boomer was talking about 2 or 3 channels. We had 2.5. ABC was on UHF. You had to dial that thing around, and sometimes it came in and sometimes it didn't. And where I grew up, that was Wichita, Kansas, in terms of ABC came from there. But the point is, I begged my dad to get cable so I could watch ESPN. And I won the battle because I think they felt sorry for me, my mom and dad, that my brother and sister were off at college. And my dad was a huge country music fan, to my mom's chagrin, who was a classical pianist, because he could watch the Grand Ole Opry on Saturday nights. So I got ESPN because my dad wanted the Grand Ole Opry. I bet you never heard that shtick before, but where were you when?
No, I thank your dad for it. Without your subscription, we might not have made it. So I thank your parents for that. Believe me, one subscription at a time. We were just trying to pick up a yard every time we had the ball.
So when did the Swami come about? What year was that right away, or did that evolve?
Oh yeah, right away. Well, see, I did the Late Show, and it was I was alone in the very beginning, although I did so many of them after that with Tom Mees, the late great Tom Mees, who, my goodness, is almost a quarter century that he passed away tragically. We had so much fun doing the shows, and we're upbeat, and people like this. It was just a gas. But so this is the fall of '79, and I made 5 picks, NFL picks, because you pretty much had a blank canvas, and not pretty much, you did. I mean, we had like no video. We had We have very little. And why not make a few NFL picks? And it was an excuse to get, other than whatever NFL news, you would have on a Friday night. It was an excuse to do a few more minutes on pro football, and we had fun. And back then, of course, it was pretty primitive. So if I picked Tampa Bay, we had the letters in orange, which was a big woo. We didn't do orange graphics, and we did some of the stuff in reverb just for fun, audio kind of echoing just for fun, and the crew behind the scenes felt a part of it. That was really the fun part of it, that they felt ownership in it. Okay, look, you can do a little, just don't surprise me, but audio, you want to make it a little goofy, go ahead. Like as I said, the chyron or the graphics or whatever you want to call it, orange, you're picking the Chiefs, you put them in red, whatever. And so that was from 1979. That was ground zero. And had I not been on the overnight show, Doc, I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't have had space, if you will, to do it. Well, we're doing this at 6 o'clock or 11:30, but because I was the junior member, at 2:30 in the morning, that's when the nicknames came out in 1980. I mean, it didn't mean you were trying to do slapstick comedy, but you were, okay, we're on late. They'll figure out if there's something really wrong I'm doing, but the bosses aren't up right now at 2:30, so let's give it a go. Nobody was doing cracking eggs on your head, but that's where those things started. And I became I don't know if I'm a good broadcaster, but my style was not because it was 2:30, but you didn't feel restricted. And we didn't know who was out there, but we knew people were somewhere out there and enjoying it. And you owe it to them. If they're watching, give it your best. And I don't know about entertain them, give them the sports information first, but they're here they worked all day or all evening or whatever, and they're here to take their shoes off and maybe have a beer and watch you. So keep them around for 20 minutes till you say good night on the Sports Center,
I love it.
Dr. Boomer, Dr. Z is a big Royals fan, and of course you mentioned the nicknames. Please tell us the story of how Hall of Famer George Brett went to bat for you, pun intended, with regard to the nicknames.
Well, there are two with George, and he remains a great friend, and that's a friendship born of ESPN that he was watching. A ball player, a Hall of Fame ball player, one of the greatest hitters of our time, without question, and certainly one of the greatest people of our time. He was a fan, and he'd be watching. They'd be in hotel rooms on Monday night in Cleveland, not going out, and there we were. So the two of them, the short one, but I will answer it's a great story, but, and so I covered a series at the end of the 82 season. They were 3 out with 6 to go against the California Angels. The football was on strike, so I went out and covered a 3-game series, Royals home to California, and he introduces himself to me, 82. I don't know that any of these guys are watching us at that time. And Chris, I'm George Brett, at the batting cage. Like, no kidding. And he introduced me to a couple of the other guys, Hal McRae, Willie Wilson, and here's Frank White, and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, I got a question for you. How come we don't have a lot of nicknames on the Royals? Which just was luck of the draw, I went, wait a minute. This is like a big pennant game. You should be... I didn't tell him this. Like, shouldn't you be grinding in the batting cage? But this is all he wanted to know. And I said, I don't know why not. I got to work on him. I can't call you. You're already George Brett before I got on. I'm not going to, unless I have an A+ nickname, I'm not going to call you Wonder Brett. I could, but you've already established it's late. I got to get guys coming up, blah, blah, blah. He goes, what's yours? I said, well, I don't really have one. He goes, well, come to the locker after the game. I'll give you one. And so, yeah, sure, George. Well, sure enough, bottom of the eighth, it was 5-5. He hits the game-winning double down the line. I go in the locker room with my cameraman after the game, and he's got about 30 people around him because everyone's trying to run it and get it on the 10 o'clock news in Kansas City. And I went down. The pitch was lowered away. I knew I could hit it to left field, blah, 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 blah. And he sees me. Now, guy, we haven't had this discussion. We only met 5 hours before, and he played a pennant game, right, which the Royals needed, and they won. And he goes, there he is, Ethel Merman Berman, So that's one George Brett story. So we became lifelong friends as a result of it. In '85, we had someone in charge of Sports Center toward the end of the baseball season said, the nicknames are just not doing it. I said, no, they're you don't have to be a baseball fan to like it. This is for everybody. No, we're going to ban them. What? And this was in September anyway, toward the end of the year, but neither here nor there. I could go on and on with the story, which I wouldn't. Look, I'm still a young guy. It's not for me to say. I said, but they're based on movies, food, rock and roll, like all sorts of stuff. This is, we're trying to get a broader, every answer he had was wrong, but they were the boss, right? So now the Royals make the playoffs in '85, which they ended up winning the World Series. I don't cover that. George Grant and Lou Palmer were our big baseball guys. And the Royals are playing Toronto in the ALCS, game one. And, of course, when George says, okay, I'm done with batting, I'm doing the interview, well, that's what every camera and newspaper reporter around him. And before the series starts. And George Grant goes up and great friends with everybody and still is, longtime MC at Cooperstown, did it for years. And still does Reds games, et cetera, et cetera. And, sure, George, Brett to George Grant, let me do this interview, sure. But before we get started, I have a bone to pick with ESPN. What is it? How come they shut my man's nicknames down? Now, this wasn't out there as any edict in 1985. George Graham was not doing, I didn't send him out there to get in the middle of any of this. I didn't. And then it became a story. And Rudy Martzke wrote it in USA Today and this and that and the other thing. George Brett incensed. The ESPN has cut down the nicknames. And it became a big deal. Apparently, in the '80s, we got the most negative mail on this over anything else. Apparently, and it was all George Brett in '86. Not because of this, that leadership was gone and the nicknames were back. So I fought the law, and the law didn't win.
Yeah.
but George Brett. I mean, I didn't put him. I mean, nobody put him up to any of this, and. So there you go. That's the story you were looking for. Two great George Brett stories from the '80s.
Love it. Love it. And Boomer, you were naming I wouldn't call them boyhood. Well, they were. A lot of them were boyhood heroes, but they stayed that through junior high, high school, and college. Frank White, George Brett, Hal McRae, Willie Wilson. The folks in the Northeast are going, what is this guy talking about? My all-time favorite, besides George at that time, was the guy that Willie Wilson replaced in center field, Amos Otis.
Yep. The Royals we liked the Royals. Of course, World Series in '80 and won in '85. And so, and they had George Brett and then they, really good Dennis Leonard and Dan Quisenberry and Paul Splittorff. We could go on and on and on. The Royals, they were good teams, really good teams. And funny, this is true, and this will dial in again if you're students at New Haven. This is way before anyone's time, but invariably in the mid to late 70s and early 80s, the Yankees would win the East of the American League, and the Royals would win the West. All right, and folks in Boston, of course, we're not Yankee fans. I mean, you get it. And so after the Yankees would prevail in the East, the Royals were kind of the last line of defense. This is in Boston Red Sox fans' eyes, to keep the Yankees out of the World Series. So the Royals had a good following in Boston. That was the biggest reason, because, hey, they're trying to beat the Yankees too. Like, the Yankees are beating them in the ALCS in many of the years. And so George hit the huge homer off Goose Gossage at Yankee Stadium, which I was at that game. And so the Royals were big fans. Boston were big fans of the Royals. George's older brother, Ken Brett, the late Ken Brett, pitched on a 67 team, the Red Sox, that made it to the World Series that were 100-1 shots. And so there was a connection. You didn't know that in Kansas City, that Boston liked the Royals in addition to Missouri and Kansas.
You made my day. And Boomer, you're talking about the Yankees. I tell my kids about this all the time, about when the Yankees and the Royals were these rivals, and they, can't quite grasp it. And when I was, again, junior high, whatever, I subscribed to Sport Magazine. Remember that? It because you could afford Sport because you got it once a month. Sports Illustrated, I couldn't afford it. It was, more issues, and it came every week. And so my parents let me get Sport. And they had on the cover one time Craig Nettles. I'll never forget this. Hot bat at the hot corner. He was the third baseman for the Yankees, and said he's the best third baseman in baseball. I wrote a handwritten letter to Sport Magazine as a young guy, arguing that they made a huge mistake, that George Brett was the best third baseman in baseball, and I was offended, and I might stop taking their subscription.
Attaboy. Well, Greg Nettles was a really good player, hit home runs right down the line, but George Brett, and then there was somebody else named Mike Schmidt that were pretty good,
Yeah, so. A little bit. Yeah.
Boomer, Dr. Z is also a big Kansas City Chiefs fan, right? Stands to reason. If he's a Royals fan, he's going to be a Chiefs fan. So he's certainly been very happy since the Super Bowl. You, of course, covered the Super Bowls. You've covered so many over the years. You're great friends with Andy Reid. Do you have a couple of Chiefs stories, or maybe one Chiefs story for Dr. Z?
Well, I mean, the Chiefs, everybody enjoyed. Look, I know the 49ers, they had the lead, and et cetera, and well, everybody had the lead on the Chiefs, right? So when we move on 5, 10, 15 years from now, to look back at the playoffs and several regular season games, I might add, but that they were down by at least 10 and to 24 to Houston in like all the games, and they came back roaring the way they did. That'll be historic. I mean, what they did, is still kind of the last sports we really remember, right? I know that in February and early March we had the college and the NHL and the NBA. But really, it's the last championship that we remember of anything. And here we are in late May doing this. I just think that. Do I have an unbelievable story? It just the way the Chiefs go about handling themselves as professionals. They have fun, but there's utmost respect, obviously, of the head coach, of the history of the franchise, which hadn't won in 50 years, and the quarterback. You don't need me to tell you, Pat Mahomes is the best in football. He's special, but I think in a man's game, and we say this, it sounds trite. So rather than an individual story, and Andy is one of my best friends, and during the season we talk every week, and so to see this come to fruition. For him personally, although he totally downplays that, but everyone felt good about this. A team from the heartland that hadn't won since '69, the whole thing, and that exciting fashion, and a guy that's won 200 games and finally got to put the Super Bowl ring on, and but I think that they business-like but fun. I think the atmosphere of the Chiefs is. I mean, you see Travis Kelce, and sometimes I love him, and sometimes even he will say, "Well, I'm a little older now. I used to get off the rails a little bit," and they still have this boyish enthusiasm to them, in addition to being at the pinnacle of the profession. So rather than a story or two, I'll tell you this: that Andy, in his office in Kansas City, has a whiteboard in his office. I don't mean in the rooms where they have the meetings and you're drawing things up, although things are more sophisticated than they were in the Vince Lombardi. We got a seal here and a seal here, right? Every week, he will start like we would doodle or something. He would draw up not plays that are already in the book, like, okay, we're playing the Raiders this week. I'm making it up. And some were specific to them, and some were just, let me draw this on the board. Let me see how that looks. And the next day he'd come in. It'd be like he'd draw 5 or 6. There's room for like 30 plays. He might erase them. Nah. Like at night before you go home, like, let me just draw these. Yeah. And a couple, yeah, that looks good. And maybe a couple find their way into the game plan. But no matter what, when they leave on Saturday to go they play the home game or go take the plane, the board is clear. And it's like ultimate doodling, except this is a genius, a football genius at work. And he's having fun. A lot of it, he looks up there and he'll tell me on a Friday, he looks at a couple things that he drew up and go, are you kidding? That's never going to work. It's as if, not the mad scientist, but there's a look inside of Andy. He's still having fun. He's got all different sorts of colored pens, if you will. I said, well, this is in like aqua and this is in purple. Does it mean anything? No, it was the pen that I had lying on the desk at the minute that I thought of this play. And then again, he'll come in Monday morning and the board is complete. There's nothing on it. And it's kind of cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's great.
Nobody knows that, so I just gave you a scoop.
And some of those plays end up making it to Sunday when they're playing, or Monday night, or the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I can't say, hey, was this on your board? It might be. Yeah, I drew that week 4. I put it in our book, but we didn't have it active until the playoffs. I mean, again, I'm making that up, but that's how some of them work. Like, sitting down and looking at a menu, I never order veal. Maybe I'll have veal tonight. And then, so he puts up, I don't know, a different sort of reverse. Who knows? He's Super Bowl champ. We don't need an explanation.
Boomer, I love
one of the great people that I've ever been associated with in sports, Andy Reid.
Well, people love him in Kansas City because of that, his demeanor and who he is. And I love his demeanor on the sideline. And he's not stoic and rigid like Tom Landry, but you just don't see him showing a lot of emotion. And he's got that great offensive mind with his flip card there. And so I'm picturing that color-coded flip card of his that you're describing a doodle or two might ended up on there as he's just going through the, down by 2 or 3 touchdowns. You just keep sawing wood and gets to the end of the game. I have to tell you a little Andy Reid story, and he'll probably remember the event and not remember me. I was at Kansas with Charlie Weiss, and Charlie and he are friends. And Bon Jovi came to Kansas City. And guys, I've gotten one autograph in my life, and my dad got it for me when I was young. He knew I wanted to be a football coach, and it's Chuck Fairbanks. That's the only autograph.
Great coach.
Yeah, one of the all-time best. So if you're going to have one, that's one to have, right? And so I've never gotten autographs. I've never been a hero worshiper. I just go to ball games. If I can't be a part of the action, I'd rather be at a high school game where I can be a part of the action than somewhere I'm just there. Well, anyway, we got on a bus and we went into Kansas City, hung out with Bon Jovi a little bit because Coach Belichick and Charlie in New England, those guys are all friends. And next thing you know, we're in the suite with Andy and Bill Self and others. I'm the complete no-name in the room. But what a neat experience. And Andy was just a gentleman, and my wife got to spend time with him, and what a neat man. That's what a great story, though. Just talk about how nice a guy is, quite frankly.
He has been grounded from the day we met. Just grounded. And he's gone, he's had losses personal and which are much bigger than football losses. And he's had great successes, and he handles both the same, which is the mark of a great person.
Boomer, I was impressed that you knew so much about the University of New Haven. We were chatting just before the show began. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised because you've lived in Connecticut for so long, but I was really impressed that, you have a little bit of history with the University of New Haven. You've spent some time on our campus. Please tell us that story.
Well, New Haven football, I want to say Division III, but something in me says Division II, but so the head football coach was Mark Whipple in the early 90s, and he was our quarterback at Brown, and he and I remained great friends, and he came to New Haven, and in a year or two, they were averaging 50 points a game in the early 90s. They had a really good running back named Roger Graham, who had a tryout with Dallas, didn't make it. He won the Division II, Division III, the equivalent of the Heisman. Is it Harlan Hill? Is it whatever? I think that's what it is. So whatever division it is, he won the Heisman of the Harlan Hill Award, and they were fun. And Mark had me come in and speak to the team in the spring one year, and I certainly was not the reason that they always made the playoffs, but they did with him, and so I kind of kept my eye out for the Chargers ever since, and I know their games, then they dropped football and then came back, and Craig Mortale, a longtime ESPN producer and an outstanding one, does the games on the radio and still, I believe, and so he keeps me posted a little bit, and I know some other alums, Ned Bowman, et cetera, but yeah, there I was, and this was a playoff team way back in the day. So don't even know if you knew that, J.W. and Dr. Z. I mean, go look that stuff up. 50 points a game, I want to say, for one of the seasons. How about that?
That's impressive. And I became aware of Mark Whipple when he created a great program at UMass, and he was putting points on the board like that. And that was kind of his MO, hadn't it always been, what he does? And I know he really got it going here. So, man, I'll tell that
story.
That
was his first head coaching job at New Haven. He went to Brown, his alma mater after that. Went to UMass. And then as far as head coach, and much later came back to UMass and when they went into Division I and had me on his, quote, staff. UMass played a few games way over their head. Had me on his staff. I went with the team, and they played at Tennessee a couple of years ago and almost won in Tennessee. And then 2 years ago, or at Georgia, we were a little over our heads for that one. But I gave a good speech the night before. But Georgia, I mean, come on now. They were like, this is in November. They were third or fourth in the country. So I think it was 66-28. We got 28 on them. But I'd never been to Between the Hedges. At any rate, we're getting off the beaten path. But Coach Whipple is now the offensive coordinator at Pitt. That's where he is now.
Yeah. Yep.
I have one more question for you, Boomer, and then if Dr. Z has any more questions, and again, you've been very graceful, and gracious with your time. We certainly appreciate it. Here's something I've never asked you, but I've always wondered, Boomer. You've interviewed literally thousands of people in your career. Who's somebody you have not interviewed yet that you would love to interview?
Well, that's a good question, J-Dub. I mean, there are sports that I don't really cover. So as far as an interview, like, for example, NBA, although I followed it, I'm not so closely the last 20 years, but in the day, absolutely. I don't know that I interviewed, the big names there. I know Michael Jordan, but did I ever do a microphone in his face? No. LeBron James and I talk a little bit at the ESPYs, but do I really know him and interview him? No. So those guys are at the top, obviously. Magic, I think I interviewed once, and Larry Bird once or twice. So I'm dating myself now a little bit. Football, I've kind of, there's some people that have long passed away that I wish I had met somewhere along the line, Vince Lombardi or something. But as far as current, that's a good, well, current, there's many because I'm semi-retired now, but, so do I know I'm doing this off the top of my head. I've met Mike Trout, et cetera. Have I ever interviewed him? No, but if I'm in the locker room, I talk with him. I have less of a. So I would say those, just because of the nature. We covered all the sports on SportsCenter as you did, but you're not out in the field on all of them. Football, I've pretty much, in my years of covering it, pretty much interviewed most everyone I would need to, which is a blessing. I never thought, I grew up, Joe Namath was my guy. I was an AFL fan, and Willie Mays was my baseball guy. And those were two of the reasons why I got into what I'm doing, and the fact that I've interviewed just about all of the football and baseball, the era when I covered it, is mind blowing. So it's a good question. I'm hemming a humming because I've been lucky enough to probably hit most all in the day, and that's what ESPN. The beauty of being at ESPN is we cover every sport, so you have more of a chance than anywhere else, and you do it on a national level, and we're covering it. So I interviewed darts players once, and I interviewed Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, so I moved up the ladder a little bit, but each one has been interesting, and each one it's been a gift, and it's been a blessing. I never would have even dreamt that being in the places and meeting the people and seeing the games and working with the people behind the scenes and in front of the cameras at our place. I never would have dreamt of any of that. 40 years of it. It's hard to believe. And I hope I hope we've made half the impression on folks at home that the people I get to cover and work with have made on me. And I've never waned in my interest and my love for it. And I hope that's apparent. And I think, and not to get too deep, but sports are one of the few things that can bring all sorts of folks together. Yeah, I know you guys agree on this. I'm talking about any socioeconomic barriers or differences, I should say. Whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're old or young, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're white or black or whatever, whether we could go on and on and on. We can still have the same discussion on the Yankees and the Red Sox, no matter what or who you are, and we're a perfect stranger. And 10 seconds later, you're standing at a bus stop or wherever you are, or on a line in a drugstore to pick up a prescription, and you're having a discussion about the football game yesterday, or the baseball, or pick another sport. And I found that to be the most illuminating of everything that I've discovered in my career here. And so, and we certainly could use all that now. I don't mean about, we got to start playing. That's not that discussion. I mean, that's health. I'm just talking about bringing people together as fans and having common ground to talk. kind of sports and music. It's interesting. Those are the things I'm into. I mean, everybody has a radio, and most everybody has watched the game, and it's common ground for discussion. And I'm thankful to be in the middle of really both. So there you go. I took a question and I, as usual, ran around. I ran an Andy Reid play and we handed it off about 5 times, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Looks great on the field too. And that's a great answer, Boomer. I think Dr. Z and I agree with you 100%. I mean, there's too much in this society, in this world that divides us. Sports and music, as you say, are 2 great unifiers.
Boomer, that was that could be an essay right there for a sports management class that J.W. teaches. That you could chew on that one and talk about that one. I could listen to you talk all day. And in light of that, I want to throw you maybe an easier question. I've been here 9.5 months, and I get to be on a podcast with you today, and I got to see you deliver the keynote at the Walter Camp Awards this year. And I'm going to brag on you a little. I think your award, they gave you an award, is the Distinguished American, which is pretty significant. And great speech. You had people, you brought people in. You could tell the level of respect people in Connecticut and here in New Haven have for you. And so that was special for me. In light of that, let me ask you, I've had people ask me this before. What is something people wouldn't know about you that you'd like them to know? What maybe it's, what do you do outside of sports? And a lot of us don't have much of a world outside of sports. What do you do do you like movies? Do you read books? If so, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite book? I asked about 3 questions at once just to let you run.
Well, I enjoy swimming. I enjoyed golf. I like movies. I don't watch a lot of them. I tell you what's unusual, and this is, nobody would guess this. I don't watch a lot of TV, not because not biting the hand that feeds me. I also like quiet, because I don't want to say we're in the pub, we're in the arena all the time, and this is what we're doing and this and that, and I love every minute of it. And then there are times I like quiet. Favorite movie would be old school, like Gone with the Wind or something. I'm a history major at Brown, Doc, so I do like reading about history, about American history major. It doesn't mean it has to be American history only, but I do feel I'm intrigued by that. I do, when I'm going to be less active, and hopefully at 65, I'm still plenty active. I always say I got 10 years of books I'd like to read. Political, not even so many sports books so much, political, historical, those sort of things. What else can I say? I'm a stoic 20th century guy. You're going to have to beat me down if you want to email me, J.W. You know that. You can't do that.
Yeah, I know.
I said 15 years ago I would never do it, and I'm James Dean, man. I don't know why. My kids think it's a joke, Although the last few years, now during this pandemic, you can see even there's more need to do things like this. But the last few years, rather than get ridiculed by everybody 40 or under, you don't do email? So you can find me. The last few years, I've had people look at me with admiration. How did you get away with that? I said, because, I don't know, it's one of the few stances that I made. I'm living life on my terms. And if it hinders my job or my ability to move forward, we approach 50%, then I'll do it. But it really came in as it being necessary in our business right toward the end of my full time. So I let it go. I'm a Taurus. I'm stubborn. That's the way it is. So how about that? You can't email me. That's true, J.W. You know that.
It is 100% true. I was explaining it to Dr. Z and our crew. And I said, well, I was grateful that you were going to be able to join us regardless. I didn't know if you're going to be calling us from a rotary phone, however, Boomer.
No, a shoe phone, Maxwell Smart. I'm dialing on my shoe phone. Or you could fax me something. I'm looking at the fax machine right here. And you could put a note in a bottle. You could do that.
Yep.
Look, I'm trying to keep the U.S. Postal Service, and one of the many things that needs help. Look, 55 cents a stamp. You can still send me stuff. Trying to keep them solvent, pal.
Yep. Boomer, I can't thank you enough. Both Dr. Z and I are very appreciative of your time. Again, you were more than generous to be with us here on the Dr. Z and J.W. podcast. Belated happy birthday. I know you mentioned the milestone 65. You turned 65 earlier this month, so happy birthday to you. And we hope that once everything gets back to normal, then we can have a guest on our campus. We'd love to have you as a guest on our campus when the time allows. Well,
it's an easy drive, and I'd like to come and see. I haven't been on campus in quite a while. I'm anxious to see what it looks like. I mean, there's no, as we get a little older, and again, 65, Medicare, hello. I was in college once. We all were, and we don't think of this day. But where we're going, we need young, intelligent, inspired people to lead us, and there is no better place to see those things flourish, if that's the right word, than on a college campus. So we hope that college, and life, again, this is an easy thing to say at this time, but even if it's somewhat compromised in the fall, that won't be forever, and that college campuses like New Haven it can just be a place where there's sparks, that will light a spark, or a spark will light something in a student, and just maybe the person to solve a big problem in the world, or to help us move forward. And you just never know who that person is. Doesn't have to be. It can be right on a campus at New Haven. It doesn't have to be at Brown or at Yale or at Harvard or any million other places. It's just young folks with inquisitive minds who want to reach for the stars. It's good to be at a college campus. I hope that everybody this fall gets to experience that the way it was meant to be. I mean, we'll see. I mean, this force is way above us, but hopefully that will come. So we'll see you. And to quote the thing I always ran, right, J.W., Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was governor of California, go Chargers, go, right? Yep. I ran that 8 million times with the Swami. So Mike Ditka will love that when I used to run it. So I'll leave you with that.
We'll see if we can get the rights to play the Superchargers song that was always for San Diego.
Yep.
Hey, Chris, thank you very much for your time. We certainly appreciate it. On behalf of Dr. Z and everyone at UNH and our crew, we wish you the best, and enjoy the rest of your time in Hawaii, and we'll see you again real soon, buddy.
Stay smart, stay vigilant, and be healthy, and let's have a nice summer as well as we can.
All right. That's Chris Berman. Chris Berman joining us on the phone from Hawaii. And as we get ready to pivot here and say goodbye to Chris, again, a reminder that our Dr. Z and I would like to recognize our presenting sponsor. That's the Pink Clover Foundation. The Pink Clover Foundation honors the late Colleen Sorbello, who passed away in September of 2017 after a 4-year battle with breast cancer. Colleen's husband, Sam, played football at UNH and has been one of our university's biggest benefactors. Please consider simply dedicating your walk, run, or hike on the weekend of June 13th in memory of Colleen and in support of breast cancer research and breast cancer survivors everywhere. For more information, go to pinkcloverfoundation.org. Dr. Z, what do you think about Chris Berman? What do you think about that interview?
I think I could have done that for another hour or two.
Easily.
I feel like I was listening to the sports version of Garrison Keillor or Ernest Hemingway, or that voice. There's several voices out there, whether it be Kurt Gowdy. I'm going way back now. Kurt Gowdy or Keith Jackson or the Swami. I mean, you hear the voice and you know who it is. And to hear him tell stories and be a part of the conversation was something I'll never forget.
Boomer is what you see is what you get. What you see on television with Chris is really who he is in real life. He is just, you know, and what you heard here today on the podcast, he's very kind. He's very generous. He loves people. He loves telling stories. He loves being around people. You know, when I was at ESPN from 2000 to 2012, so I've known Chris for 20 years now, and it never ceased to amaze me when Boomer would come into the studio that so many people would, he was like a magnet. So many people would want to be around him, right? Because he is such a big personality and such a great human being. Dr. C, he actually used to have, he probably still does, he has a handler. He used to have somebody get him from, because there's like all these buildings on campus, as he told you, get from the newsroom to whatever studio he's got to get to, because so many people want to talk to him, and Boomer's too nice to say no to people.
Yeah.
So like the show, say the show's on at 7:00 at night, and it's 6:59, and the director and the producer are freaking out. Where is he? He'll be there. He might be there at 6:59 and 45 seconds, but he'll be there ready to go. But he needs a handler because so many people want to talk to him. But he's a Hall of Famer in life. I mean, he's just a wonderful, wonderful human being. And I'll tell you a quick story here before we sign off. He was really instrumental in my career. I don't know if Boomer remembers this. We've talked about it once or twice over the years. I mentioned I started in 2000. So the Kentucky Derby in 2000, so 20 years ago, the winner of the Kentucky Derby was Fusaichi Pegasus, and the jockey was Kent DeSormo. The Kentucky Derby was on, and it had finished, and they went to me in the ESPN News studio. I was doing a 3-hour solo ESPN News broadcast. I didn't know my own name by the end of the 3 hours, and I could not pronounce Fusaichi Pegasus, and I could not pronounce Kent DeSormo. And it was the lowest part of my career early on. I had started there in January. It was May, so 5 months in, and they made a mistake hiring me. What the heck am I doing here? So that was a Saturday. I saw Boomer, I don't know if it was the next day or maybe Monday, but he was in his office, and I said, well, if there's anyone I can talk to about this, it's Chris Berman. So I went to talk to Boomer. I explained to him, I couldn't do this, and I couldn't do that. I really screwed up, and, I feel terrible, and I don't feel like I belong, and this and that. And he said, and in his voice, I can't even do the imitation, but he said, J.W, when you say something, it's off to Pluto. Forget about it. It's gone. Right? Hey, it's off to Pluto, J.W. It's gone. And you just got to let it go. And he's right. I mean, and that's a piece of advice that he gave me 20 years ago that I still hold dear to me today. And I've tried to teach to people I've worked with at ESPN, at NBC, and now at the University of New Haven. We're teaching public speaking, we're talking in sport management, people are doing presentations. You make a mistake, who cares? Whatever, it's off to Pluto. Let it go and move on.
You can apply that to life in a lot of ways. That's an incredible story. But before we go, though, this is one of my favorite parts. We got to bring Broccoli Rob out here just for his last moment of insight, words of wisdom. But what a fun afternoon. I don't know. To connect with all the viewers, I had Zoom calls from 10 to 4 today. And when I got in this chair, I drove from West Haven to Brantford, and I was on here with you guys in the green room, and I'm going, wow. I needed to change of pace, but, these shows are often like a Zoom call to some degree. And so I hope I can muster, but just listening to him and being around him brought me, it was like reading a great book.
Yeah, what'd you think?
Just the history behind it. I thought the most interesting thing before we even got on air was the history of the Merritt Parkway. I thought was fascinating.
Our listeners didn't get that. I'm just finding out what I've been on the Merritt Parkway, didn't know it was the Merritt Parkway.
Just a complete pro, and being on a podcast from Hawaii, to do it because you, JW, and your relationship with him and the time that he spent on there, that just shows what a complete legend he is by his stories, and more importantly, the time that he gave to you and to us, and that was something, I'm going to cherish this past hour. That was great.
Yeah, that again, I think this past hour summarizes who Boomer is. I mean, this is right. He could do anything with his day, especially in Hawaii, right? I've never been. Dr. Z says it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of things you could be doing. He could be out on the golf course, which maybe he will be later today. But that tells you everything you need to know. Chris cherishes his relationships with people, and I think you heard that, right? Not only with me, but with the University of New Haven and Mark Whipple and Andy Reid and George Brett and Belichick and Charlie Weiss and all the names that he rattled off. He is really, as a people person, really cares about humanity. And right, I mean, he would never blow us off. I mean, never blow me off. He would never blow anyone off from ESPN, which is the great thing. I mean, he will talk to anyone, guys. He'll talk to anyone, whether it's the president of the company or the janitor. Doesn't matter to Boomer, right? You're all the same. You're a human being, and if you want to talk to him, he's more than willing to talk to you. And he does favors for people all the time and stuff that we never even hear about. But that's the type of guy he is, and that's the type of guy we all want to emulate. So I'm a big Chris Berman fan and have been for a long time and always will be.
Ethel Merman Berman.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
Good job, boys. That was a great show.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks to you and John for putting it together. Parting words here, Dr. Z, before we sign off for the day.
We're going to have to dig deep to find one better than him. I think we're in episode 8 or 9 here, and that's as good as radio, or I guess podcasting gets, I think. That was a joy just to be a part of it.
Yeah. Well, again, we've talked about this before in our podcast. When you listen and watch the Dr. Z and J.W. podcast, you get these opportunities to hear people and interact with people that you don't get anywhere else. And that's one of the things that we bring to the table. And, we're fortunate to have the relationships, just like Chris is fortunate to have relationships with people. You have great relationships with people, so do I. And we use that to our advantage, and the University of New Haven community and all of our audience benefits. So again, we're grateful to Boomer for joining us, and we're grateful to our presenting sponsor, the Pink Clover Foundation. Again, for more information on how you can help in the fight against breast cancer, please go to pinkcloverfoundation.org. Thanks to everyone who tuned in today, and please follow us on social media to stay up to date on our most recent episodes. And when the next ones will air, you can always find us on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play, and across all of our social media platforms. For Dr. Z, for our producer, Broccoli Rob Thompson, for our executive producer, Jonathan Mays, and of course, again, a big shout out to Chris Berman. I'm J.W. Stewart. Thanks for joining us here on the Dr. Z and J.W. podcast. We'll see you next time.